All right, guys, here in Cork County at the National Space Center, Rory Fitzpatrick is going to be kind enough to show us about, and it's kind of interesting, all the things that they're doing here, including things associated with Cosmic Girl and the launch out of Spaceport Cornwall. I didn't even know that until I got here, so let's go check it out. All right, Rory, thanks very much for joining us today. So first of all, tell us about this massive antenna we've got here.
This is a 32-meter standard A antenna built by General Dynamics and NEC back in the 80s. Originally, this was built to take all the telephone traffic from Europe to America. And back in the early 80s, it was very expensive to go through Goonhilly, and the European telephone companies set up their own one to take traffic from the most westerly point in Europe they could find, which is Ireland. And then within Ireland, if you look at where we are here, we've best infrastructure in the south of Ireland, and if you look right around, you'll see hills the whole way around here, making this a really quiet site for radio frequency noise. So that's why this site was chosen. It went online in '84. It's a big opening here, the Japanese ambassador, all the excitements. And then it ran from 1984 to 97 when the first fibre came across the Atlantic, and then it ran for about 5 or 6 years after that as a kind of a backup, and in 2005 it was mothballed. So 2005 Air, the national telecom company, were looking to get rid of the site and bulldoze it back to a greenfield site. We started negotiating with them when we actually got our hands on it in 2010, and we opened it as the National Space Centre, trying to build a local satellite service teleport for the new emerging space industry.
So as we were speaking before, in order to make this place operational the way they did at Goonhilly, it would take 5 million euros or 10. What would it take in order to make this operational?
For the big dish to be operating, we were looking at probably 2.5 to 3 million just on refurbing and cleaning and getting that dish back in a level that would work, and then you probably have another 2.5 million in the operational side of it, getting it going. Now we're in discussions with people at the moment, but we're very keen to talk to anyone who would be interested, because there isn't the money in the national coffers in Ireland for this kind of thing, which is a pity, but that's the way it is. You're a small country on the edge of Europe. We don't have the big budgets of a lot of the big main European countries, so we got to work with what we have.
So in other words, for what Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk pay on a parking ticket, you could get this place operational. Is that pretty much the case?
That would be nice. Yeah. So if either of you are listening, send me the check and we'll name it the Musk Telescope, or the Bezos Eye.
Well, let's go and have a look then. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, this may come as a surprise to you guys, because it comes as a surprise to me that we have Goonhilly and Spaceport Cornwall's operations being handled right out of here in Ireland. So tell me, Rory, what are we looking at here?
Well, this is, we're just supporting Leaf Space and Goonhilly with the Cosmic Girl plan, because we're so much further west. It's a better location for viewing Cosmic Girl, which will be flying somewhere around here, southwest of this site. And this is a perfect location for them to link up to track during the launch. So we're looking forward. We were hoping it would happen this month. Now there's a delay on licensing and stuff like that. So, you know, it's, as soon as we get through Christmas and out the other side, we're all very excited here to come down and watch and be part of, well, not part of, we're watching and assisting really more than anything, but it's going to be exciting.
How far offshore is Cosmic Girl going to be when it drops the rocket?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen the licenses. It's somewhere outside the Irish jurisdiction, but within Irish controlled airspace. But because Ireland manages the airspace for the whole North Atlantic through Shannon. It's the Irish Aviation Authority. It might be quite a bit out, we don't know.
Is it, I mean, so it's possible, especially if they do this at night, it's possible that you may actually see the rocket flare up.
From West Cork, absolutely. Maybe from here. You might see it from here on a clear night. I don't know. We're hoping to see, because when you look at the drawings that are on the internet about this, they're very vague, and they may not be exactly specific drawings. So when the licenses are given and stuff like that is done, we'll then see more detail as exactly where it's going to be.
And what sort of communications and tracking is this particular dish going to be carrying out for the mission?
This has been run through Goonhilly, so Goonhilly will be operating this. We don't deal with the tracking itself. This is just piped back to their control station back in Spaceport Cornwall, Goonhilly and Leaf Space.
Understood. And this other dish here?
That's a Ka band, a 9-meter Ka band antenna that we know on. It was built by Viasat as part of Eutelsat's Skylogic program. We're looking for a project for that at the moment. We took over ownership of that this year, and it's an exciting dish. It's relatively new, and Ka band obviously right now is in high demand. So we have a couple of people interested in that, but we're looking for projects for it at the moment.
Sounds great. I hope people are listening in right now. So as you can see, we've come a bit of a ways from the main dish, and then we have some other things over here. Can you tell me anything at all about these arrays?
The lads for Spire, which we can go up and talk to in a second and see would they talk to us. They have a project they're finishing off at the moment. Their dishes on the right hand side, and the newest one we have here on the left is the Contact dish. That was announced last year, and it's exciting. Contact are a very, very sharp company. They're very good technically, based out of Luxembourg. They're a South Korean and Luxembourg company. And then Leaf Space are the Italian lads. They're growing up fast. They came on here when they were very young. They were just out of college when they got their funding, and it's very exciting to watch them progress and develop. And I think they're just the first wave of what will be many waves of European space companies.
So tell me a little bit about, European spaceflight right now. I mean, what's your take on this? There's obviously challenges, as we were discussing before. There's the fact that the UK is no longer part of the EU, and that could, present problems to, what's happening in the future. So, how do you anticipate this developing? Are you excited about what's happening right now, or do you think there are more problems than can be overcome?
First of all, it's hugely exciting. As I was saying to you when we were discussing stuff earlier on, it's exciting seeing all the young guys that are coming out of college that are mad keen on space and that are starting to get into this. So we're on the very, very edge of a massive explosion in space companies. So this is the very beginning. So it's really positive, and it is going to be insane over the next couple of years how exciting this area gets. The Mars, having a human landing on Mars is a monster thing. It's going to be insane how excited everybody gets about this. It's going to be almost hysterical. And that's going to be a really good thing, because every man and his dog that is interested in space will be starting up spin-outs and ideas and new companies. With regard to the launching side within Europe, Europe is well behind, and this is a historical thing because of the Cold War and because of all the stuff that was going on, but also Europe was a load of separate countries that is slowly merging into a federal state. Now, the situation with the UK leaving recently is a problem for that, and it may cause problems for the UK for launch, or it may cause opportunities. It's very hard to read which way this will spin, but certainly there is going to be a whole host of launching facilities built in Europe. Obviously, you can't build one in Bremen or in Paris or in London. So you need to be on the edges of Europe. And there will be a lot of opportunities come up for the launching side of this as Europe starts to move into this. Politically, it's going to be fascinating to see how the Brexit affects the ESA versus the Commission kind of struggle that's going on at the heart of European space. And Europe is slowly starting to get its teeth into space as a proper kind of state. And it's very hard to read how that will happen. Will Europe come together, or will it break apart again? History will tell us. But at the moment, it's looking like Europe is becoming a federal single state.
So we got Kevin Jackson here with Spire Global. Tell me real quickly, I appreciate you giving us your time today. What is the function of this antenna here?
So this is a CubeSat tracking antenna here. So we have actually 3 antennas on this particular array, and you may see it move here. It's tracking quite often throughout the day because we operate about 100 cubesats that are in orbit, various orbits. And so we have UHF antennas and S-band, one S-band antenna there. So we transmit via UHF and we receive primarily via S-band. Yeah, so we've just finished a nice kind of revitalization of our equipment here. We installed a new enclosure and did some upgrades to the antennas and whatnot. And so, yeah, should be in tip-top shape.
Why did you choose this location? And are you just providing communications for a variety of different companies?
Actually, they all
belong to you. So you have a
Spire
constellation of 100 CubeSats.
roughly 100, depending on, yeah, sometimes we launch, you can see it tracking right now, in fact.
I'm very happy that I came up here at this moment. That's cool.
And you've one named after you, don't you?
I do, yeah. So yeah, we're constantly kind of launching and also decommissioning. So our satellites have kind of a shorter lifespan than most, yeah, the idea is, you know, constantly refreshing the technology, right? So as soon as basically a satellite becomes obsolete in orbit, then we can kind of refresh it. So that number is fluid, but it's a rough estimate. We have roughly 35 ground stations all around the world, and so we picked this site just for strategic location and good partners. Yeah, so they've been great to us, and they're always supporting us. So
fantastic. Well, it was unexpected to meet you up here, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Now, this is a question I've asked a number of people in Britain, but I've never asked a European outside of Britain and the whole environment that they have there. Obviously, the way things have always been, that is to say, manufacturing satellites in Europe and then shipping them to my country, or maybe some of them being launched by Arianespace, is the way things have always been. Now, all of a sudden, there's this opportunity for a lot more satellites being launched from here and not so many being launched from these countries. There's a lot of money at stake here. Do you foresee or sense any sense of inertia or opposition to, to power players in Europe and the America for that matter, who don't want to see things go that way, who want European satellites to be launched exclusively or almost exclusively out of America?
I think there's a mixture of all of this. Like the reality here is that the industry is it's building momentum. Now, SpaceX and Kuiper and the first phases of this race are fascinating. And they're very exciting, and it's really, really a big deal. Like just on a very quick thing, when I started in this industry 10 years ago, you had 6,500 satellites in orbit. That was a guesstimate, and that was all satellites. Now, Musk on his own is talking about 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, like every week it's a different number, and it's going up. And that's just one company. And then you have maybe 5 or 6 big American companies that are going to do it. You have then the Chinese, the Japanese, the Russians, India. Like, there's going to be so many satellites launched and such a huge industry grow out of this. It's going to be phenomenal. So that's really exciting. On the political side of stuff with Brexit, it's a really bizarre thing. Like, for us watching from the sideline, it is bizarre that the UK has voted to leave Europe. We just don't get it, because for Ireland, being part of Europe has been a really positive experience, and we see this as being a really key thing going forward. And I honestly think that it was a game of poker the British politicians were playing that went wrong. They were playing poker with the European, with Germany and France, and they said, "Oh, you make us top table or we walk." And they said, "Oh, okay, we walk." And they said, "Okay, we're walking. We're going now. We're going soon. We'll be gone in a second." And suddenly they're outside the door thinking, "What happened?"
Right.
And that's the way it seems to have happened to me. Now, whether they will come back into Europe, I would hope so. In the longer term. In the short term, it causes a whole host of problems. Like, you can't have a federal European space program with the UK as part of it unless there's some kind of bizarre treaty done. And at the moment, I can't see that happening with fights on other areas. So it's really one to watch.
So this doesn't bode well, it sounds like, for ESA. I mean, given the fact that the UK, contributes such an enormous amount of their budget, and also, and also looks like has a lot of the most mature spaceports between Saxavord and Spaceport Cornwall compared to anything else happening in Western Europe. I mean, is that going to be problematic, or do you think that private, space flight will press on in spite of all of that?
I think private spaceflight will press on no matter what happens. I think that's going to happen one way or the other. On the political side of things, I don't think it's the end for ESA, but like Joseph Ashbacher is after doing a really good job in the last year or so on really ramping up what's going on in the position of ESA. And I see a big problem for ESA in how they interact with non-European countries and European countries. But they may just have an ESA light, a bit like NATO and Partners for Peace. And there's always ways of changing parts of the organisation to be outside and on the inside. So there may be a way forward, but it won't be as a single European. Like, you can't have a European space agency that's working for a federal Europe that has countries outside federal Europe.
Right.
That doesn't work. So they need to restructure it somehow. And I think at the moment they have a lot of momentum. It would be crazy to throw that away and to try and start from scratch. So there is some kind of path down the middle that there will be a deal done. Hard to tell how the deal will be, though.
Yeah. And this is something obviously a lot of my British viewers care a great deal about. And once again, you being outside the structure, it's interesting to get your perspective on this. The CAA, obviously, they have 13 months and counting that we have the Virgin Orbit licenses still not approved. Obviously, that's problematic. And, the folks at Saxavord made it very clear in a report published by the UK government that a 13-month, window to get licenses approved could be the death knell of the whole program. Do you see things improving as time goes on with licenses being approved over there? Have you gotten any information on that?
From where we're sitting, this is just teething problems. This is a brand new industry. There's only a handful of companies have actually launched rockets privately. Right? And right now, all the governments that are being approached are trying to deal with this as quickly as they can. The problem is that it's a very, very complex area, dealing with national sovereignty, dealing with defence, dealing with liaisons with other nations. The amount of things they're having to take into account, a lot of legislative changes are needing to happen across the board. They're then having to revert back where, if a nation state wants to change the law, they then have to take into account the ITU and all the other global organisations. So it's not a simple thing like just issuing a permit for someone parking in town.
Right.
This is a thing that has a lot of knock-on effects. So normally you will have a Department of Transport, a Department of Defence, a Department for Enterprise, a Department for whatever you're having plus the kitchen sink. They're all involved. And the minute you bring more than one government department in, you then have all the secretaries and you've got a massive kind of negotiation going on. And that's just within the government side of things. Then you have the politicians trying to help and you have the business. So there's so many moving parts here that getting it all lined up and getting it synchronized is very, 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 very difficult. Once it is, then you'll be able to bang them off once there's a process.
Right. So you feel that once they get through this teething process, then 30 launches per year from Saxavord, assuming they actually reach that goal, which theoretically they've been approved. Do you think that's possible? Do you think that Britain can ever get there to be able to approve that many launches per year?
I don't see why not. This is something that once you establish a business and it's working, then it will work to its maximum.
Right.
Now, you have to take into account they need 2 pads, because if there's an accident on one or if there's a failure on a launch, you have to move over to the other. There's a huge amount of stuff to take into account. But this is part of where they are now. Like, the health and safety statements for rocket launching is like that thick. It's a massive undertaking. And it's like you've got the actual site itself. You have the immediate environment, you have the downstream environment. All of these need to be taken into account, from health and safety, environmental impact, and you have 12 different government departments, as we were saying, involved in making sure that their department isn't infringed or in trouble. So I think it's all very good. I think it's early days and it's a learning process. Like, if you look back at when cars came out first, guys started building cars and they were just driving around the place, and then slowly legislation started coming in. But it took a long time to get proper stuff written. Now that was a different thing where you build one in your shed and drive it off.
Right.
Now, if you could do that with rockets, you'd have rockets flying right, left, and centre now. Okay, but it's not, and for good reason, because you'd have guys landing in town and hitting the wall and doing all kinds of mad stuff. You know. So I think it's good. I think it will happen. I think the UK is after marking this as an area they want to establish a global presence, and they will.
Okay, Rory. So what are we looking at here?
This is the old Rocket Labs antenna. It's been there for a couple of years now. It's a UHF or VHF, I'm not sure which. And then the new one, which is great fun, is we put this in recently, the Contec tracking antenna, and that's an SNX band. So it's exciting. They had we were doing an official opening, but there was a YouTube opening recently where they posted the video online of that. You can see it on our website. It's lovely. It actually shows when we tried to put the top of the dome on, the wind was too strong and it was being blown, so we had to wait till the next day. But that was grand. Then is the old Myoto one. It used to be Exact Earth. It's for tracking ships. So that's one of the older ones on site, and it's been great fun because we did the Navy comms for a couple of years here for the Irish Naval Fleet. We haven't done it last year. We might do it again and bid for it again for the next few years, but it's hard to make money off it at the moment, the comms for navies, because the Irish Navy doesn't have a huge budget. But it's something that in time we'll carry on again, you know.
Okay, Rory, we still have more to see here, obviously. So you just told me that this is a communications with the ISS right there.
This is a fun one. This is it's a VHF link. And on the ISS, they have an old VHF portal on the side of the space station. And there's an ARIS program in Europe with the European Space Agency where they can communicate with the schools. So every so often the astronauts will make a bit of time to come on and do a VHF link. The last one we did was just before lockdown, where we had one of the local schools. And what's really funny is the ISS normally comes up over the horizon here and passes up over us and out into the horizon over here. And when it's on the edge of the horizon, the VHF signal is blurred out by the atmosphere. So it's the real old school stuff where you can hear and you slowly have the voice come into kind of clarity, and then you've about 3 minutes of clear talking as they cross over, and then they the other way, and then they disappear over the other side. So the kids, it's very exciting for the kids.
Sure.
And of course the main question all the kids want to ask is about the toilet.
Of course.
Yeah. How does that operate in space? You know,
of course.
All those kind of key questions.
Yeah.
So
and this one here?
That one is an 11-meter. It's a C-band antenna, and that's just doing the odd project for some of the old broadcast stuff for the government. So.
All right then. Well, very interesting. A lot happening here, and I hadn't the slightest idea that a lot of this was taking place. A very nice facility. Let's talk some more. As was the case with Goon Hilly, these folks couldn't tell me about their relationship with SpaceX, but I did a little bit of digging, and it is public knowledge that Starlink has facilities here as well. So Starlink obviously is putting their transmitters and their antennas wherever possible in order to provide the maximum amount of coverage, and it appears that this facility is just as appealing to them as Goon Hilly was. But let's get back to the tour. Last question. We're coming back to Ireland on this one. So, and I asked you this question before. I mean, young Irish kid wants to go to space, wants to be an astronaut, just like somebody at NASA. But the funding here is so meager. I mean, as we said before, just sending one person to orbit would cost so much more money than Ireland's entire budget. What do you say to that kid? How does this become possible in the future?
Well, I think there's going to be, with the next phase of this space race, you have a really exciting opportunity for younger people now. And that is that all the commercial stuff that's going on, there is an industry here going to evolve in people traveling to space. And they'll be carrying rich tourists, they will be carrying payload, they will be doing moon and Mars bases. All those need people to work to do it. And while there's a lot of people globally want to do that, we've a very, very well-educated and highly motivated workforce here that speak English, that are effectively kind of a mid-Atlantic point between Europe and America. We're very well positioned for the space industry, but we're only new into it and we're just finding our feet. And I think it's going to be a lot of opportunity on the software side. For the astronauts, hopefully, this announcement yesterday where we have our first Irish astronaut with the Japanese mission, that would be fantastic, and she's from Cork, which is even better.
How about that?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. So this is for us really exciting, and hopefully she'll get there.
Yeah.
But she's only going to be the first in a line, and it's all the younger gang. I was saying to you earlier, I was at Bremen at the space show, and it's really exciting because there was 20 or 30 startup companies with kids just out of college that are doing their thing, and we need to support them. I'm not going to do that. I'm too old to be starting out fresh myself, but I can hopefully help these younger people do it, and that's what we need to do,
Rory, it's been delightful. Thank you
very
so
much.
much for your time. Really appreciate it.